ORTT, President of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago, and Chancellor of UTT. And now, ladies and gentlemen, remain standing for the national anthem of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago. And you would remain standing thereafter for the invocation.
With boundless faith in our destiny, we solemnly declare, side by side we stand, islands of the blue Caribbean Sea, this our native land. We pledge our lives to thee, ere every creed and race find an equal place, and may God bless our nation. Ere every creed and race find an equal place, and may God bless our nation.
O Supreme One, origin of all being, we thank you for giving us another day as we gather to celebrate the building dedication and honoring ceremony for Professor Kenneth S. Julian. Give us a keen understanding of the importance that the role of UTT, the National University, has in the development of our communities and Trinidad and Tobago by extension. Give us faith, courage, and wisdom to fulfill our purpose and promise. Show us how to effectively serve you so that all of our education, knowledge, and skills may find true fulfillment as we learn to do your will. May we ever be aware in everything that we do, that knowledge comes from learning and wisdom comes from you. Thank you, O Supreme One. Now, let us bow our heads in a moment of silence for those members of our UTT family who have passed. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Alex Hewitt, Executive Guild President of UTT. Ladies and gentlemen, you may be seated at this time. In case of a fire or an emergency, there will be an audible and visual alarm, and you are required to evacuate using the nearest emergency staircase and assemble at the designated muster point, which is on the northeastern side of this building. If possible, you are to take your personal belongings and walk orderly and briskly to the nearest exit, or as instructed by the safety wardens. At the muster point, you will be given further instructions. Washrooms are located on the left and right sides of the elevator, with male and female washrooms clearly designated. Her Excellency Christine Carla Kangaloo, President of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago and Chancellor of the University of Trinidad and Tobago. Dr. the Honorable Keith Rowley, Prime Minister of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago, and Mrs. Rowley. Dr. the Honorable Nyan Gadsby Dolly, Minister of Education. Members of the Cabinet, ambassadors and members of the diplomatic corps, Our guest of honor, Professor Kenneth S. Julian, founding chairman and president of the University of Trinidad and Tobago. Members of the Board of Governors of UTT, Professor Prakash Prasad, president of the UTT, members of Professor Julian's family, specially invited guests, senior members of staff at UTT, members of the media, ladies and gentlemen. To start off this auspicious event, we have a special musical performance by the APA Choir, led by Dr. Roger J. Henry, Director of the Academy for the Performing Arts. They will sing Baba Yetu, which means Our Father in Swahili, and it is a rendition of the Lord's Prayer set to music. Please give them a warm round of applause. Baba Yetu, performed by the APA Choir under the superb musical direction of Dr. Roger Henry. It is now my pleasure to invite Professor Clement A.C. Imbert, ORTT, Chairman of the Board of Governors of UTT, to deliver the welcome and opening remarks. He is also a close friend and colleague of Professor Julian and has worked with him over the years. Please welcome Professor Imbert.
Good morning. Her Excellency, Christine Carla Kangaloo, President of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago and Chancellor of the University of Trinidad and Tobago, Dr. the Honorable Keith Rowley, Prime Minister of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago, and Mrs. Rowley, Dr. the Honorable Nyan Gadsby Dolly, Minister of Education, members of Cabinet and other ministers, too numerous to call. Thanks for so many of you coming here today. Ambassadors and members of the Diplomatic Corps, our guest of honor, I repeat, our guest of honor, Professor Kenneth Stephen Julian, founding chairman and president of the University of Trinidad and Tobago, and much, much more. Members of the Board of Governors of UTT, Professor Prakash Prasad, president of UTT, members of Professor Julian's family, specially invited guests, senior members of the staff of UTT, and again, thank you for coming out in your numbers, members of the media, ladies and gentlemen. It really gives me great pleasure, actually it's an honor to invite you to this dedication ceremony this morning. This is it's called EB1, this is East Block 1. This is one of 4 buildings on the eastern side of the campus. There's the western side of the campus, and in the middle of the campus, there's a graduation pavilion. This is the main building of the signature buildings of the campus, the Tama campus of the University of Trinidad and Tobago. Professor Julian was born on September the 2nd, 1932 in Aruca. He was a star from small. He was recognized by his teacher in primary school in Aruca, who, when he was transferred, carried him to St. Joseph to again be his, I would say, special student at St. Joseph. In those days, for those of you who are old enough, the examination for secondary school was called college exhibition. And if you did well, very well, you came in the first 100, you would get books and things like that. Of course, Professor Julian passed, and passed very well, within the first 100. I'm not sure how high up. I was not told. Professor Julian, you probably will tell me at some point. He has told me a lot of things over the years. And he then went on to St. Mary's. And after St. Mary's, he was an apprentice at what is called UBOT, the United British Oilfields of Trinidad. He got a UBOT scholarship to the University of Nottingham in the Midlands in the United Kingdom. Graduated in 1957 with first class honors. Then got a scholarship to go to UBC, University of British Columbia, where he graduated at a PhD with distinction. He spent some time in a consultancy company. Actually, he was the first, the first PhD graduate in energy systems at UBC. He was snapped up by a consultant firm in Vancouver, but very soon after, he got a call from John Carpenter, who was the head of electrical engineering in UWI, inviting him to come to work with the UWI. Professor Julian told me that Mr. Carpenter or Dr. Carpenter told him nothing about terms and conditions, nothing about salary, and he said yes. He wanted to come to serve his country. I'd like to say the rest is history. He was the first PhD local at the Faculty of Engineering in the University of the West Indies. Followed soon after by some of the stalwarts like who eventually became Professor Phelps, Professor IDC Imbert, Compton Dean, Kenneth Casabon, and people like that. The founding fathers of the Faculty of Engineering. Professor Julian was made dean in 1964 at the young age of 32, the youngest dean in the Commonwealth at the time. The foreigners who came to set up from the UN, the Faculty of Engineering, had a dispute with the UN, and they started to leave very quickly. So Professor Julian was thrust into this position. He remained dean for 10 years, gave it up voluntarily. In those days, there were no terms for dean, but continued really to lead the faculty, and later on, in the late 70s, into a massive expansion with Professor IDC Imbert, a civil engineer, as his riding partner in that venture. In 1974, Professor Julian chaired the Energy Coordinating Task Force. Again, I like to say the rest is history, but this led us, not very long after, into the use of natural gas rather than flaring it, as I used to see in Mayaro. I lived in San Grande and spent my Easters in Miami, and I'd see these big flames and wondered what they were. We were flaring the gas to get at the oil. But he made sure that we monetized this asset. And through his chairmanship and other influence at the time, the formation of Kariri, 1970, MIC, 1974, IDC, before that, Industrial Development Corporation. The successor company, of course, is ETEC. Tech, which he chaired for a number of years, and many other companies. Later on, the NESC, National Energy Skills Center, and of course, UTT as a founding executive chairman of UTT. There are many other, there's no aspect of industry, innovation, engineering education that Professor Julian hasn't influenced in this country over the years. I first met Professor Julian in 1964. My brother was recruited from Barbados to come to work at the university. And I went to visit him and I met Professor Julian. I immediately asked him if he was any relative to Inskip Julian, who was a good friend of my father. And he said yes. 1964 to now is a long time, yes? So I've known this gentleman for almost 60 years. And I've had the pleasure of working with him in many companies. He seemed to drag me along to companies where he was chairman. MIC, he was chairman there. After about 6 months, he said, Prof, I have to see about UTT, so you have to be the chairman here. I said, okay. Kariri, when he became chairman of Kariri later on, he said, Prof, you have to come with me, and so on. And of course, I was appointed deputy chairman in 2015 at UTT. However, I had been with Professor Julian from the very inception in UTT. The very first committee in 2003, then a very small committee of 6 of us to implement the recommendations of the steering committee in 2004. And although I wasn't on the board, I resisted because I was on too many boards at the time. I told him. I couldn't resist him sending me all over the world to assist in the relationships that we had with several companies and universities abroad. I can go on and on about my relationship with Professor Julian and his other exploits, but time doesn't permit. What I'd like to do is, again, to repeat how happy I am to be here as chairman of UTT, to dedicate this building to Professor Julian. One of several accolades that will unfold later on next month. Today is the last day of the month. So I would like you to join me in a lustrous round of applause. And if you can stand, please, to Professor Julian. Professor, you don't have to stand. So, thank you very much. As you know, Professor Julian's story is the story of modern Trinidad and Tobago. Thank you again.
Thank you very much, Professor Imbert. Thank you for sharing the stories about, just a few of them, of the achievement of Professor Julian. As we celebrate Professor Julian's achievement in engineering and technology, we also acknowledge his appreciation for the arts and culture of our diverse nation. He was an avid supporter of the Academy for the Performing Arts and encouraged the integration of science and art in education. To showcase some of the talent that he admired, we have several performances by faculty members of the APA throughout the ceremony. First, we have Miss Suzanne Mohip, Instructor 2 of Dance, who will perform an Indian classical dance piece. Miss Mohip is a trained Indian classical dancer and teacher who has performed locally and internationally. Please welcome Miss Mohip as we enjoy Tarana in Rag Hansanwani. Miss Suzanne Mohip. Tarana in Rag Hansanwani, performed by Suzanne Moheb. We thank you for sharing your talent with us. I now invite Mr. Philip Julian, one of Professor Julian's sons, to share with us some personal reflections on Professor Julian as a father, grandfather, husband, and family man. Mr. Philip Julian.
Good morning, everyone. There's a lot more of you than I thought. Her Excellency Christine Carla Kangaloo, President of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago and Chancellor of the University of Trinidad and Tobago, Dr. the Honorable Keith Rowley, Prime Minister of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago and Mrs. Rowley, Dr. the Honorable Nyan Gadsby Dolly, Minister of Education, members of the Cabinet, ambassadors and members of the Diplomatic Corps, our guest of honor, my father, Professor Kenneth S. Julian, founding chairman and president of the University of Trinidad and Tobago, members of the Board of Governors of UTT, Professor Prakash Prasad, I knew I would stumble over that one, president of UTT, members of Professor Julian's family, specially invited guests, senior members of staff at UTT, members of the media, ladies and gentlemen, good morning. On behalf of Dr. Kenneth Stephen Julian and the entire Julian family, I would like to extend our thanks to the Chairman and the Board of Governors of UTT for this esteemed honor that has been bestowed upon Dr. Julian, the naming of this building after him. I'd also like to thank everyone who has come here today to bear witness to this auspicious event and to emphasize how much it means to Dad that all of you are here. And with the greatest of respect and appreciation for the highest positions in the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago being here, if I'm being entirely honest, the person who probably matters the most to my father at this time is the presence of his grandson, my son, Nathaniel Julian, who flew in on a red-eye this morning to surprise his grandfather. Please join me in giving Nathaniel a round of applause for making the effort to be here today. He is the international representative for the rest of the family, my wife Angelique, our daughter Kaylin, and my brother Stephen. Now, for those of you who know Dad's humor, it's probably best that I'm saying these few words on his behalf. Since he may have been so inclined to share with you an anecdote that Dr. Eric Williams has shared with him some decades ago, in relation to the risks associated with a building being named after someone. Suffice to say, these risks are not inanimate and structural in nature. They are more human and biological in nature if someone has had a little bit too much to drink. It's probably best that I leave it there. In all seriousness, though, again, for those of you who know my father well, you will know that he is not one for pomp and ceremony surrounding himself. In fact, to have him talk about what he's accomplished or where he's come from is generally met with responses that distract, beguile, and ultimately redirect the conversation to others that he views as more relevant to the topic at hand. He's very good that way. However, today I'm pleased to say that my father is comfortable with the act of naming this building after him. Not because of the tremendous respect and honor that it represents, not just because of that, but because of the purpose that it serves. And not just its physical purpose of educating the new generation of young minds, which absolutely is at the heart of what is important to my father, absolutely. I'm speaking to the purpose of inquiry that the name of this building will elicit in those very same young minds, namely, who is Dr. Ken Julian? And more importantly, why should I care? Some of you may jest at that first question, but I would like to share with you a statistic that you may find at first alarming, like I did, but then I'll invite you to take a different, more healthy perspective on it. And the statistic is this. We asked 2 questions to a class of 60-odd pre-engineering UE students. Now, I ain't casting shade on UE because they were here at UTT, just stating the facts. As part of the lead-up for the recent Hydrogen Symposium co-hosted by UE, UTT, and Kenneth J. Green, that was held earlier this year at the UE St. Augustine campus. These 2 questions were the following. Do you know what Point Lisas is? And do you know who Dr. Julian is? So of the 60 students, 2 knew what Point Lisas was, and none of them knew who Dr. Julian is. Now, after I picked myself up from the floor, I asked myself the same question that my father would ask in the same situation. What is the learning opportunity for these students, for all students, that are posed with these questions when they do not know the answers? The who he is inquiry is relatively straightforward. That's the Google search away. What he's contributed to, a couple more well-placed Google searches. So that leaves, especially in my father's eyes, the most important question for those students to ask themselves: why should I care? And it's their respective journeys in response to that question. That's where the potential for their self-realization lies. For with the guiding hand of our country's educators, each student can come to the realization that it's not only what Dr. Julian did, it's what Trinidad and Tobago has done. We all need a little reminding from time to time of what this great country of ours has done. If only in service of galvanizing us towards what this great country of ours can do once again, once the minds and hearts of our people believe in its own greatness. In the darkness that consumes our nation's headlines and our collective psyches, let us shine the light of historical brilliance to show the way towards a brighter future. For what we as a society, as a people have done for this country, this region, and in some occasions, this world, is nothing short of extraordinary. We are an extraordinary people living in an extraordinary land. One only has to scan this room to catch glimpses of it, not only in my father, but perhaps in some instances because of him. By that I mean, over the past number of years since moving home, I have quietly taken note of stories shared from many of the greats amongst yourselves who have been influenced and inspired by Dr. Julian, from the Honorable Prime Minister to Professor Clem Imber, just to name a few. The stories go on, too many to recall in these brief remarks. And with all these stories, there's one common denominator, that somewhere along their journeys, my father simply told these individuals either directly or through an action, intervention, or recommendation that he believed in them. You only have to listen back to Professor Imber's story of Dad sending him on many actions around the world and installing him on many boards as one brief example. And because of their own belief in the professor's capabilities, they fundamentally saw in themselves what he saw in them. That spirit, that spark, that bright light of greatness. And that inspiration towards believing in oneself is what the naming of this building can represent for the students that enter these hallowed halls. For we are citizens of Trinidad and Tobago, and our country's reputation for doing the extraordinary precedes us particularly and not limited to the energy sector. Dad's modus operandi, or formula for success that came so naturally to him in that sector, is his remarkable ability to bring business and private sector together, to be in a collaborative national service of a greater vision that the country benefits from. He has infused that public-private win-win formula into the project development company that he founded 25 years ago. I think it was your third retirement, Dad. Kenneth Systems. And I only have to cite some recent examples, one recent example of the growing regional interest from a number of entities and governments for its affiliate that I had the privilege to initiate, Kenneth J. Green, to present at various conferences and summits. And why are these invitations increasing? There are two reasons that I can identify, and it all has relevance to today. The first is I believe that we are primarily in service of developing the business case for a regional green energy integration of the Caribbean for secure and sustainable energy future for all, which is something that my father also holds very dear throughout his career. And second, coming full circle, there is, of course, strength in a name. The name of the organization, Kenneth J., I won't lie, it can be a little daunting for us at times, working for a company that was originated by Dr. Kenneth, Ken, Stephen, S, Julian, J, Ken, S, J, so the mystery is revealed. And having that very name intertwined into the name of a company as a continual reminder, stressor at times, of the high quality and standards expected of us every single day. It is worth mentioning that this innovative naming was conceptualized by the same person quietly behind all of the successes of Dr. Julian, my mother, the Honorable Patricia Ann Julian. I think she deserves a round of applause for her unwavering support. As well as the development of this stress-inducing, inspirational name. The message here in all of this, ladies and gentlemen, is that there's an inferred expectation of the extraordinary associated with anything that has Dr. Julian's name associated with it. Indeed, one could say that as of now, as of today, that higher expectation has been expanded to include this building, and by extension, the students and the faculty of this university. I therefore encourage the staff and administration of UTT and all associated with the imbuing of knowledge and the cultivation of learning in these hallowed halls to take on this remit, to recognize that any student that studies in and graduates from the University of Trinidad and Tobago have now not only a higher expectation associated with the name of Dr. Julian, but also the greatness that can be associated with the name of this country. For if one of us, and I know a few of the greats in this room who did, started their childhood in abject poverty, with barely enough money for shoes, hardly a roof over his head, catching chicken in his shared Aruca backyard for Sunday lunch, can go on to be the architect of Point Lisas, the generator of Atlantic LNG, the originator of UTT, then who are the rest of us to think anything less of ourselves in our capabilities and in our great country? When the world said that developing nations cannot have the capability to develop one of the first large-scale petrochemical facilities on the planet, Trinidad and Tobago has proved them otherwise. When the global energy industry said that developing nations cannot have the capability to develop one of the first large-scale LNG facilities in the Western Hemisphere, Trinidad and Tobago has said, take a look over here. And when some international experts on the international front say that an industrial-sized green hydrogen facility cannot be built here because it hasn't yet been built anywhere else in the world, all I will say is watch this space. And that, whether it be called country confidence or bold belief is what this named building and this national institution can offer to its students. It is not only a reminder of the name of my father, who has done great things for this country, our country. It is more of a symbol, a reminder of what our country and its people are capable of what these very students attending here, or indeed any other educational institution, are capable of now and in the future. And to all those who have responsibilities associated with the education of young people here in UTT, I invite you to consider that what is being called for today lies not only in your aptitude, but your attitude. That the single greatest honor that you could bestow on my father is that every day you come to work and you look at his sign and you remember the name of this building, that you take a moment, yes, to reflect on the accomplishments of Dr. Julian, but also on the accomplishments of the people of Trinidad and Tobago. And most importantly, to believe in the potential of the young people attending this institution and to help them see their potential for themselves, for them to believe in their own greatness. Ladies and gentlemen, I thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Philip Julian, for giving us a glimpse into Professor Julian's life beyond his public persona. I'm sure for all of us present, it was indeed both inspirational and motivational, geared towards a better Trinidad and Tobago. We now have Dr. Mia Gormandy Benjamin, Assistant Professor of Music at APA. She will play a rendition of The Impossible Dream, accompanied by Miss Unmi Shwe on e-piano. Please welcome them. We thank Dr. Gormandy Benjamin and Ms. Schwer for that most delightful rendition of The Impossible Dream, and how fitting, because all dreams are in fact possible based on the life of this great man before us. To honor Professor Julian's legacy in a creative way, the Heroes Foundation commissioned a motion comic titled Powered Up, the Ken Julian story, which tells the story of his journey from a young boy with a curious mind to a national hero with a visionary mission. Please direct your attention to the screens as we play the motion comic.
Like most villages in Trinidad and Tobago in the 1930s, Arouca was a small agricultural stop on the railway to Sangre Grande. In September 1932, Arouca is where Kenneth Stephen Julien was born. As early as his days at the local government primary school, Ken and his teachers noticed he had a special knack for helping classmates with their schoolwork. Ken went on to win a scholarship to pursue his secondary school career at St. Mary's College in Port of Spain. With his love for teaching, his first job was as a teacher at Fatima College. He soon moved on to UBOT, the United British Oilfields Trinidad Limited, where he once again earned a scholarship to study at the prestigious Nottingham University in England. With a freshly minted Bachelor of Science degree, first class honors, he returned to UBOT a few years later. But he didn't stop there. Ken went on to study at the University of British Columbia in Canada, becoming the first PhD graduate in electrical energy systems from that university. Once again, the lure of teaching drew him back. In 1962, he was invited by the University of the West Indies to join their newly established Faculty of Engineering. Dr. Julian was the university's first lecturer with a PhD and soon became the dean of the faculty, one of the Commonwealth's youngest university deans. He was named Professor Emeritus in 1997. His background and a presentation at a one-day industry conference technical session at the Queen's Hall caught the attention of Dr. Eric Williams, the session's chair. Dr. Williams, Trinidad and Tobago's first Prime Minister, was looking to reform the country's electrical sector and infrastructure. One exchange in particular intrigued Dr. Williams. Listen, Trinidadians should leave power generation to the British. How many boilers did England blow up before getting it right? I think TNT can do this. Let's take the risk and make this ours. Subsequently, Dr. Williams invited Professor Julian to serve on the board of TNTEC, the Trinidad and Tobago Electricity Commission. Over the next 40 years, Professor Julian would emerge as a catalytic figure in the global energy and education sectors and in a nation's economic and industrial transformation. From agricultural Arouca to modern-day game changer, Professor Ken Julian, a true transformer.
I'm sure you will agree with me that that was a captivating and inspiring story, and I think at this time we should give a lusty round of applause for life that's so wonderful. In our presence today are two distinguished guests who will deliver their addresses on this occasion. First, we have Dr. the Honorable Nyan Gadsby Dolly, Minister of Education. Dr. Gadsby Dolly first entered Parliament as a representative for St. Anne's East in 2015 and served as a Minister of Community Development, Culture and the Arts. She now serves as Minister of Education, and has been instrumental in advancing the education sector in the face of the pandemic. Please welcome Honorable Minister of Education.
Her Excellency Christine Kangaloo, ORTT, President of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago and Chancellor of the UTT, Dr. the Honorable Keith Christopher Rowley, Prime Minister of Trinidad and Tobago, and Mrs. Rowley, Ministers of Government, Professor Clement Imbe, make sure to get it right, Chairman of the Board of the Governors of UTT, and other governors of the board here present, Professor Prakash Prasad, President of UTT, our guest of honor, Professor Ken Julian, TC, and members of the Julian family, other specially invited guests, members of the media, ladies and gentlemen. Today is indeed a momentous occasion, one that holds great significance for the University of Trinidad and Tobago, for our nation's education system, and for the legacy of Professor Ken Julian. We are gathered here to pay tribute to an outstanding patriot who has made indelible contributions to Caribbean society. It is with profound gratitude and immense pride that the University of Trinidad and Tobago names the main administration building after a true luminary, Professor Kenneth S. Julian, TC. Professor Julian has spent decades in the practice of academic and professional excellence, establishing himself as an indomitable figure in the fields of engineering, education, and leadership. When we look at the industrial facilities of Point Lisas, or the offshore platforms gracing the waters of Trinidad and Tobago, it becomes evident that his contribution is indelibly ingrained in the history of Trinidad and Tobago. Professor Julian's dedication to the education of our youth and his commitment to the development of Trinidad and Tobago take on added significance in the light of our evolving educational landscape. The advent of the COVID-19 pandemic ushered in both national and global transformations, giving rise to unparalleled challenges in safeguarding the education, welfare, and protection of our children. Fast forward to 2023, our task is now to revitalize our society in the face of significant economic, political, social, and environmental changes. And to do this, we require a compelling shared vision that will be essential in leading us forward. And not only that, we require the citizens with the skills and the will to do so. At the Ministry of Education, our mission is crystal clear regarding our vision for providing modern, relevant, quality, equitable education and developing the ideal Trinidad and Tobago citizen, one who will see patriotism as a call to action, one such as Professor Kenneth Julian. Within the framework of our education policy, we find a profound synergy with the achievements and values of Professor Julian. Allow me to highlight a few key points of convergence. Excellence in education. Our national education policy places a strong emphasis on nurturing a culture of academic excellence. Professor Julian's distinguished career as an educator, researcher, and mentor has set a remarkable example for us all. His commitment to pushing the boundaries of knowledge aligns perfectly with our policy's aspirations. Innovation and research. Professor Julian's pioneering work in the engineering field showcases the power of innovation and research. The National Education Policy 2023 to 27 recognizes the critical importance of support for research-driven institutions and promoting innovation within our education systems. This building, named in his honor, will serve as a symbol of our commitment to these ideals. Inclusivity and access. The education policy places a strong emphasis on providing quality education that is accessible to all. Professor Julian's passion for education and his tireless efforts to make knowledge accessible to a wide range of learners exemplify our policy's commitment to inclusivity. This building will serve as a hub where diverse minds come together to access the transformative power of education. Leadership and vision. Professor Julian embodies this. He embodies the transformative impact of visionary leadership in both academic and various national and international capacities. Our national education policy acknowledges the pivotal role that visionary leadership plays in shaping the future of our young citizens and therefore the future of our beloved nation. This building, which bears his name, stands as a testament to his visionary contributions. In honoring Professor Julian today, we not only celebrate his remarkable achievements, but also reaffirm the ministry's commitment to the principles and goals outlined in the National Education Policy, which strives to create the enabling environment to produce many more Professor Ken Julians, many more citizens of this caliber. May this ceremony inspire all of us to redouble our efforts in fulfilling the promises and aspirations of our Trinidad and Tobago, to plant trees under which future generations will find shade. Thank you, Professor Julian, and may your legacy live forever in our hearts and our minds. May God bless us all.
Thank you very much, the Honorable Nyan Gadsby Dolly, Minister of Education. Thank you for your enlightening speech as you captured Professor Julian's contribution to education and the man as a visionary, the man who has always been, for us, an example of exemplary leadership. Thank you once again, Dr. Gadsby Dolly. We now have a performance by Mr. Michael Cherry, veteran actor and director, award-winning playwright and screenwriter, and assistant professor at the Academy for the Performing Arts. He's here to deliver a monologue from Othello, one of William Shakespeare's most influential works of art. Mr. Michael Cherry, where are you?
Most potent, grave, and reverend seniors, my very noble and approved good masters, that I have ta'en away this old man's daughter, it is most true. True, I have married her. The very head and front of my offending hath this extent, no more. Rude am I in my speech, and little blessed with the soft phrase of peace. For since these arms of mine had 7 years pith, till now some 9 moons wasted, they have used their deadest action in the tented field. And little of this great world can I speak, more than pertains to feats of broil and battle. Therefore, little shall I grace my cause in speaking for myself. Yet, by your gracious patience, I will a round, unvarnished tale deliver of my whole course of love. What drugs, what charms, what conjuration, and what mighty magic, for such proceedings am I charged withal. I won his daughter. And till she come, as truly as to heaven, I do confess the vices of my blood. So justly to your grave ears, I'll present how I did thrive in this fair lady's love, and she in mine. Her father loved me, oft invited me, still questioned me the story of my life from year to year, the battles, sieges, fortunes that I've passed. I ran it through, even from my boyish days to the very moment where he bade me tell it, wherein I spake of most disastrous chances, of moving accidents by flood and field, of hairbreadth escapes in the imminent deadly breach, of being taken by the insolent foe and sold to slavery, of my redemption thence, and with it all my travels history, wherein the idle, rough quarries, rocks, and hills, whose heads touch heaven, it was my hint to speak. Such was the process. And of the cannibals that each other eat, the anthropophagi, and men whose heads do grow beneath their shoulders. This to hear would Desdemona seriously incline. But still the house affairs would draw her thence, and ever she could with haste dispatch, she'd come again, and with a greedy ear devour up my discourse, which I, observing, took once a pliant hour, and found good means to draw from her a prayer of earnest heart, that I would all my pilgrimage dilate, whereof by parcel she had something heard, but not intentively. I did consent, and often did beguile her of tears, when I did speak of some distressful stroke that my youth suffered. My story being done, she gave me for my pains a world of sighs. She swore in faith 'twas strange, 'twas passing strange, 'twas pitiful, 'twas wondrous pitiful. She wished she had not heard it, yet she wished that heaven had made her such a man. She thanked me and bade me, if I had a friend that loved her, I should but teach him how to tell my story, and that would woo her. Upon this hint, I spake. She loved me for the dangers I had passed, and I loved her that she did pity them. This only is the witchcraft I have used. Thank you for everything.
These are very significant moments for us as we recognize the validity of education. I taught Michael at St. Mary's College when he was doing his A-level literature. We never know the starting point of the journey. Michael also performed a great deal. We were on the stage together as we did many musicals under the superb direction of Lindy and Boddenrich. So it's about passing the baton, it's about continuity, and that connects beautifully with what Dr. Gadsby Dolly was sharing with us earlier. Michael, congratulations. We now have a video presentation titled Transformer, Engineering the Future of a Nation, which showcases the establishment and subsequent development of Point Lisas, one of the most significant projects Professor Julian spearheaded during what we can only describe as an illustrious career. Again, please direct your attention to the screens as we play the video, and I'll cross before it this time.
In so many cases in history, the mother of invention is not always necessity, it's audacity.
Eric Williams, his famous statement, well, where there was sugar, there'll now be wire rods. Even before it produces food on for seed. That's what he had to say.
Right.
How does one man help engineer the transformation of a tract of swamp into a powerhouse that would transform a society dependent on agriculture into a giant in the global steel and energy arena? In September of 2022, almost 56 years to the day, after the Point Lisas Industrial Port Development Corporation was incorporated, we returned to the estate with one of its pioneering figures and visionaries, ingenuity.
See, this whole road leading to Point Lisas was built for Point Lisas.
Okay.
Yeah, this whole exchange going to Point Lisas.
What was here before?
I think some little truck or so.
Okay.
And before you had to get there,
Hold on.
we had to go through ship owners.
Right.
But this was built because Point Lisas had a big port.
One of the men who dared to imagine that sugarcane workers and cocoa farmers could be transformed into makers of steel and harvesters of energy. When the energy and steel industries were dominated by the few nations that built them, the local economy was still dominated by agriculture. Tenacity.
But in the minds of the people, there's a big conference in England, Trinidad, Calypso and thing, man, Carnival, all this thing with our business for.
Join us on the road in an exploration. How does a single individual become a transformer?
I had shoes, but it was kept for Sunday. You had to go to church, and you couldn't go to church barefoot.
Professor Julien, educator, electrical engineer, visionary, a change maker, identity.
We have something that a lot of countries do not have. How we got it, I don't know, but we have something here that is very precious, not fully utilized, but very precious. Part of the challenge of motivating young people is for some of these stories to be told.
Transformer, engineering the future of a nation.
Informative, inspirational, indeed impressive. And now the program continues with Dr. the Honorable Keith Rowley, Prime Minister of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago, who will deliver the feature address. Dr. Rowley has been serving as the Prime Minister since 2015 and has been a longtime friend and admirer of Professor Julian, and has supported his vision for UTT and the nation. Please give a warm welcome to the Honorable Prime Minister.
Thank you very much. Your Excellency, President of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago and Chancellor of the University of Trinidad and Tobago, Mrs. Christine Kangaloo, Dr. the Honorable Nyan Gasbidoli, my cabinet colleague, Minister of Education, Senator the Honorable Paula Gupiskun, Minister of Trade and Industry, other members of the cabinet, my other parliamentary colleagues, Mr. Robert Bermudez, Chancellor of UWI, Professor Brian Copeland, Provost of UTT, Professor Klunga Imba. I have been warned not to say Imbut because they are different. Professor Clement Imbut, Chairman of UTT, members of the Board of UTT and the Academic Council, President of UTT, Professor Prakash Prasad, other distinguished professors and members of faculty, members of UTT Executive Management, the very special person alongside our very special professor, Mrs. Patricia Julian, other distinguished guests, members of the media, ladies and gentlemen. Today, it is my distinct privilege to deliver this address on the occasion of the dedication of this UTT administration building to the university's esteemed founding chairman and president, an outstanding son of the soil and revered national icon, a patriot, our very own Professor Kenneth Julian, familiarly and simply referred to as Ken Julian. I commend the university's management for orchestrating this dedication ceremony, as this will serve as an enduring testament to Professor's legacy at UTT and a permanent reminder to future generations of students of the profound impact he has had on the lives of all of us in Trinidad and Tobago, including the establishment of this university and this, the Tamana main campus. It is said that there's a generation out there which is blinded by its own apathy and indifference to this country's historical junctures or economic and social achievements. In other words, how we got here, the comparatively comfortable quality of life we enjoy, and the current economic and political currents which are affecting that quality of life, indifferent to it all. It is said too that the younger generation speaks assertively about their rights and entitlements while ignoring the sacrifices made by others, their individual responsibility, and the necessary spirit of patriotism. It's unfortunate to hear these charges because in our early post-independence years, Dr. Eric Williams, the founding father of this nation, spoke to us then and to coming generations firmly and directly that we all as citizens needed to be disciplined and determined because this nation's future, just as it belongs to us, also depended on us. He said that this government had set out policies and designed programs for shaping the country, diversifying the economy, and giving it a basis for growth. The next step was up to us, the people of Trinidad and Tobago. If we succeeded, Dr. Williams added, this country would have demonstrated that the Caribbean could rise above its history of dependence, degradation, and self-contempt, and that we could create worthwhile societies, independent economies, and self-respecting people. One Monday columnist who seemed to have recognized this importance of Professor Ken Julian in that trust wrote some time ago that, and I quote, every Trinbagonian, after saying his or her morning prayers, should say, "Thank you, God, for Dr. Williams and Professor Ken Julian," unquote. Elevating these two figures to the near deified status with which Americans refer to their founding fathers, the British Winston Churchill, the French Charles de Gaulle. Our history must document Dr. Williams as the great visionary, Professor Julian as the architect builder, who along with a team of dedicated public servants created the modern Trinidad and Tobago and our quality of life. Yes, with its glitches and setbacks, but comparatively much better than so many others in the world. It was the synergy of vision, drive, and determination that existed between Dr. Williams and Professor Julian that created the foundation for this country to be considered later as a Caribbean tiger. Now that Professor Julian has retired from public life, in his golden years, there's a deeper symbolic significance of this event given the magnitude of his prodigious achievements over the years. Indeed, many eminent persons in this country would echo my sentiments that this country owes Professor Julian a debt of gratitude for laying the foundation for decades of economic prosperity. Oh, if we are a grateful people, we will all say thank you, maybe even amen. On behalf of the government of Trinidad and Tobago, I would like to extend heartfelt congratulations to Professor Ken Julian on this well-deserved honor and outstanding recognition. As the famous quote says, quote, "What you do for yourself dies with you when you leave this world. What you do for others lives on forever," unquote. Professor Julian's career has been a sterling example of country before self. He has been widely acknowledged for his decades of unwavering, tireless, and dedicated service and the advancement of our country's energy, engineering, and education sectors. He has been appropriately described by many as a genius, pioneer, stalwart, visionary, trailblazer, legend, entrepreneur, and simply a giant of a man. His life is defined by many first-of-its-kind achievements in this country. His gentle but effective visionary leadership style, leading by example, has been a source of inspiration and motivation to those who have had the privilege of interacting and working with him. Throughout his career, he has demonstrated integrity and a strong sense of social responsibility, actively engaging with communities and promoting initiatives aimed at improving the lives of individuals across the country. Despite many accolades he has received over the years, I am sure you will agree that Professor continually embodies the qualities of simplicity, compassion, and humility. He has always been approachable and is blessed with a good sense of humor. I do not recall ever seeing Professor lose his grace under fire or show any signs of stress when tasked with such mammoth levels of responsibility. And despite the many challenges and adversities that would have presented themselves along the way, indeed, he is gifted with an exceptional temperament that kept him consistently composed and always dignified, always knowing how many of us to ignore and proceed on his life's work. I'm sure that it took much personal sacrifice for a professor to remain on the cutting edge and at the top of his game. He has stood the test of time, proving his resilience through changing government administrations, and continue to demonstrate his responsiveness and dynamism in a rapidly changing global and technological context. Many would also be aware that Professor was not just an academic, but possesses an equal measure of enthusiasm and appreciation for all forms of local art, music, and culture, particularly the national steel pan and classical music, which he made every effort to support, promote, and share with the UTT community and the wider public. Professor's positive footprints are today scattered throughout our country's landscape, as he has left an indelible legacy, particularly in the spheres of education, engineering, and the energy sector. Professor, we are awed by your lifetime of accomplishments. In paying homage to you, I think it's incumbent on me, and I consider it an honor as leader of the government of Trinidad and Tobago, to take this opportunity to give a brief synopsis of some key milestones of your career achievements. As you heard before, our professor was born in Aruca. Might even have been born, could have been born in Tobago, Diego Martin, or even in Tamana. But he came from a humble and supportive background. His academic brilliance was at the root of his meteoric rise, augmented by his discipline, focus, and commitment to excellence. He attended St. Mary's College, having not gotten into bishops, and then proceeded on scholarship to university in England, where he obtained the first-class honors bachelor's degree in electrical engineering. In 1962, he obtained that PhD in electrical energy systems from the University of British Columbia in Trinidad and Tobago. That had a bearing of putting an end to a lot of flambeaux and petrol lamps in Trinidad and Tobago. He joined UWI St. Augustine campus as the first local engineering lecturer, and just 2 years later was appointed as the first West Indian Dean of the faculty, a post which he held for 12 years. He was appointed professor and head of department of electrical engineering at UWI in 1970 and remained in that post for 16 years until his retirement in 1996. He served at UWI for some 35 years in total, where a building there also carries his name. He was also named Professor Emeritus in 1997. Professor was the first Caribbean national to attain the rank of Fellow of the Institute of Electrical and Electronics Engineers in the United States. He conducted extensive academic research and obtained patents for electrical systems. He also published extensively in his field and also served as a visiting scholar at Cambridge University. During his expansive academic career, Professor established himself as a pillar of knowledge and inspiration in the field of engineering, both locally and internationally. He has taught and mentored many of this country's top engineers, some of whom are now leaders and captains of industry in the fields of energy and education. As an esteemed professor, he dedicated his career to teaching and mentoring students. He dedicated his inspiration then and saw them pursuing academic excellence. He was reported as saying, and I quote, The legacy I am most proud of is my students. They are all running the show. They still call me Prof. The legacy of students holding key positions, unquote. Professor Julian has also been a champion of promoting sustainable development practices and advocated for incorporating innovative technologies in engineering. Early in his career, Professor served as a trusted advisor of the country's beloved first Prime Minister, Dr. Eric Williams. They collaborated and spearheaded the development of policy aimed at transitioning our economy from a withering plantation agricultural-based one to in the post-independence period, 1970s to 1980s, to an energy-based one. Pursuant to this, Professor Julian was appointed in 1974 as chairman of the Energy Coordinating Task Force, leading the planning, development, and implementation of our industrialization program aimed at monetizing the country's natural gas resources. It was this group that steered the country's thrust into the global gas market and other diverse industries of methanol, ammonia, and power generation. One of Dr. Julian's most notable accomplishments is related to the establishment of the Point Lisas industrial estate in the 1970s and 80s. Prior to this, he undertook extensive research related to its strategic location and the potential of the estate to generate employment opportunities and promote economic growth. This proved to be nothing short of a watershed initiative, which put the country on a strong footing for its subsequent industrial development and economic prosperity. Over the past decades, the Point Lisas estate has attracted numerous foreign investors and created thousands of employment opportunities, contributing significantly to the country's economic growth, development, and the quality of our lives as we know it today. It also spawned the development of the country's manufacturing sector, particularly in the areas of petrochemicals and even steel production. The estate spans some 860 hectares and today continues to remain at the heart of the country's industrial activity. Professor also conducted pioneering work in natural gas processing and in developing innovative technologies for the extraction, purification, and liquefaction of natural gas. His research is said to have significantly improved the efficiency and co-effectiveness of these processes, catapulting Trinidad and Tobago into becoming a competitive global producer of natural gas. He also spearheaded research projects aimed at harnessing solar power to reduce dependence on fossil fuels, promoting sustainability and reducing carbon emissions. By the close of the 1980s, the estate had become a booming industrial hub, manufacturing petrochemicals, iron and steel and other products, a model recognized across the globe. It is no secret that the success of the estate has been attributed to Professor Julian's vision and foresight, which led to transformation of the economy. Professor also steered the post-independence industrial development of the country through his directorship of several state enterprises. He chaired the first board of directors of the National Energy Corporation, which got to work building gas-based industries in Trinidad and Tobago. The iron and steel plant started by the task force was completed in 1981. The methanol and urea plants were completed in 1984. Major infrastructural projects included expansion of the Point Lisas industrial estate, continued well beyond. He also served on the National Gas Company of Trinidad and Tobago, the NGC, from 2002 to 2010, and led the expansion of the country's natural gas industry. The National Gas Company's work was supported by the National Gas Exports Task Force, a technical committee established by government and chaired by Professor Julian. With just under 0.1% of the global gas reserves, Trinidad and Tobago has become a major global producer of ammonia and important to the world's ammonia supply chain. Wearing yet another hat, Professor chaired the Trinidad Cement Limited, TCL, from 2006 to 2011, contributing to the growth of the construction sector. He also served as chairman of Evolving Technologies and Enterprise Development, ETEC. One of Professor's longest stints was on the board of directors of the Trinidad and Tobago Electricity Corporation, TNTEC, where he served for 22 years, from 1964 to 1986, holding the post of chairman from 1975 to 1986. Under his stewardship, TNTEC's net generating capacity was said to have increased sevenfold. Between 1993 and 1994, he held the chairmanship of the technical task force appointed to review the expansion of generating capacity of Trinidad and Tobago, which led to the reorganization of the sector and the separation of responsibilities with respect to power generation and power transmission. All in all, Professor had also made an outstanding contribution to the power industry. In 1992, Professor Julian was appointed to serve on the Standing Committee of Energy, a committee headed by the Prime Minister of Trinidad and Tobago, responsible for the development of the energy sector policy. The impending natural gas shortage at the time was addressed by providing upstream producers with take-or-pay arrangements, which acted as an incentive to companies to monetize their natural gas reserves. This resulted in an increase in the natural gas production, and by 1996, gas had surpassed oil as the dominant hydrocarbon in our economy. Professor Julian was a key resource who assisted the government at the time in navigating these challenging issues. Additionally, an LNG plant, the largest in the Western Hemisphere, was established at Point Fortin in 1999. Another of Professor's crowning achievements relates to the development of the country's first greenfield LNG project, Train 1. As one former minister put it, and I quote, "The establishment of the LNG business in Trinidad and Tobago would not have occurred but for the vision of Professor Julian and his commitment to its realization," unquote. Today, most of the country's natural gas utilized in the production of LNG and has proved to be the major resource, the major revenue earner for this country. Professor's expertise has been sought after by governments and industry leaders. Over the past decades, he has featured as an influential figure in policy making and strategic planning within the energy sector. In my role as Prime Minister, I have also had the pleasure of consulting with Professor on strategic high-level energy policy and related initiatives. As a former head of department myself at the University of the West Indies, I too revered Dr. Julian as a tower of intellectual strength and was tutored by Professor when I assumed the responsibility of leader of the opposition. He said to me then that if I aspired to lead the country, as the post implied, then I need to know something about the international gas market and its importance to Trinidad and Tobago. It was not left at that, but I found myself after sitting in class at Wood Mackenzie's offices with packages of text and data analysis, being tutored at the request of Professor Ken Julian. The hours spent there served me in good stead later on, when I did in fact have to lead the cabinet through turbulent times and initiated significant negotiations with our many multinational partners. His work has also been recognized internationally, as I said before, with invitations to deliver keynote speeches at conferences and symposia around the world. He has undertaken respected consultancies in several emerging oil and gas economies, including East and West Africa, through his well-established international consultancy company, Kenneth Systems Limited. Hand in hand with these contributions, Professor has been the recipient of numerous accolades and honors throughout his career, including the prestigious Shakespearean Medal Gold and the nation's highest award, the Trinity Cross, in 2003. In 2008, he was also bestowed the Doctor of Laws, honoris causa, by the University of British Columbia, where he attained his PhD. This is an honorary degree awarded to individuals who are acknowledged for having made significant contributions to society in general. With all these achievements in hand, it is not surprising that Professor has been credited with being the driving force in the development of the national energy sector and has been labeled as the country's energy czar. His strategic insights and groundbreaking research propelled Trinidad and Tobago into the global energy landscape, allowing the economy to thrive and survive. Through his tireless efforts, Professor Julian has not only transformed the energy sector, but he has paved the way for a sustainable and prosperous future for Trinidad and Tobago. He has been sometimes fondly referred to as the father of the downstream energy industry. Today, as expected with the passage of time, market forces and changing global context, some of the businesses in the estate have had to close their doors. But the government is constantly reassessing energy initiatives, including adding value to its ammonia and methanol production, and is exploring green energy options, including hydrogen production, to supplement diminishing natural gas supplies. Professor's son, Philip Julian, Managing Director of NewGen, has not surprisingly taken up the baton from his father and is leading the transformation of the green energy initiatives for Trinidad and Tobago. Professor's educational contributions to the country culminated in his serving as the founding chairman and president of this UTT, Trinidad and Tobago's first national university, providing yeoman service, particularly during the university's embryonic stages from 2004 to 2010, and again in a second stint as chairman from November 2015 to 2019. The university has evolved into a symbol of national pride and has proved to be a strategic investment in the socio-economic development of our country. By way of context, I should recap that in the year 2001, it was estimated that only 10% of fifth form graduates entered UWI, with many youths having to seek further education abroad. At the time, there was also an annual shortfall of science and technology professionals, technicians and craftsmen. Further, the country had several publicly funded educational institutions operating as standalone institutions without uniformity of standards in program content, duplication of program offerings, and ineffective management of resources. It was decided that there was need to optimize the utilization of state resources in the tertiary sector, expand access, and streamline standards across the board. UTT was the brainchild of Professor Julian, who conceptualized the need for a national university with an emphasis on science and technology. It was against this background that the cabinet appointed a steering committee in 2003 to prepare a proposal for establishment of the university. Professor Julian effectively chaired this committee, which comprised 25 eminent persons from academia, the private sector, and the government. The committee conducted extensive research and market surveys, aimed at identifying critical skill gaps and other areas considered important to the country's socio-economic development. Cabinet accepted the report of the steering committee, and this gave birth to the University of Trinidad and Tobago in 2004. While Professor prioritized producing ready-to-work graduates aimed to industry needs, it was equally important to him that UTT graduates had exposure to service learning so that they would value the importance of giving back freely to their communities. He articulated the university's core values of excellence, scholarship, entrepreneurship, and to inculcate in the graduates a set of overarching skills that will help them navigate new and emerging technologies in the global context. During the university's formative stages, Professor Julian took the lead role in the institutional design for the university, which comprised an academic and corporate body. This novel structure of the university represented a departure from the traditional design of other tertiary institutions in the region. The aim was to allow the academic body to focus on academic matters while avoiding the potential problem of departments and faculties operating as silos. To ensure the relevance of program content, captains of industry were appointed to the board of governors and to advisory councils for the different programs. Fortunately for UTT, Professor Julian maintained excellent relationships with industry leaders, and this in no small measure has paved the way for UTT's success. Due to his significant accomplishments and excellent international reputation, Professor was able to recruit from overseas a highly accomplished provost for the organization, Professor Srivastava. He also recruited several distinguished academic professors from across the globe to lead the different program areas. When it opened its doors in 2005, the university had engaged some 68 persons with doctoral level qualifications. He placed a strong emphasis on ensuring highly qualified faculty and encouraging academic research and publications. From the inception of UTT, Professor Julian took on the challenge of bringing the new fledgling university into the vanguard of engineering and technology in areas of key importance. These include science and engineering, process and utilities, information communication technologies, construction, manufacturing, criminology, and other areas of interest. He also piloted new and creative program offerings including maritime, biosciences, agriculture and food technologies, the performing arts, fashion and design, animation, arts and letters, and sports and leisure studies. At its launch, the university had about 184 staff members. Professor prioritized ensuring that the university received both institutional and program accreditation from reputable international bodies to ensure world-class quality. He also placed emphasis on information technology and supporting the introduction of new teaching pedagogies and methodologies. One of Prof's strategic initiatives involved fostering alliances and collaborations with leading international universities in different program areas to ensure the university's curricula was benchmarked and remained globally competitive. The university collaborated, for example, with the Institute of Manufacturing of Cambridge and the University of Texas. Professor was passionate and underscored the importance of UTT developing programs which are relevant to our national needs, particularly in the fields of engineering and technology. Under his leadership and direction, the university was also able to successfully integrate the former Teachers College and technical institutes, among others, absorbing staff into the family of UTT. This required much industrial relations expertise, business acumen, and a vision with focused objectives. Given the rapidly expanding student population, Dr. Julian spearheaded the plans for construction of the signature building main campus at this beautiful and scenic Tamana Intech Park. This campus represents a significant capital investment by the government and is located on expansive acreage. Professor Julian recognized that in addition to providing leading programs and academic staff, they had to be supported by world-class facilities so that students would have the appropriate research and development facilities and other infrastructural support to elevate their entrepreneurship and academic performance. Indeed, I understand that Dr. Julian took a lead role in providing oversight for the construction of the building, which commenced in 2007, by personally chairing the Planning and Development Subcommittee of the board, which supervised the tender and initial construction phases. Built on the global vision of Professor Julian, his commitment to excellence, and drawing on his vast experience in university administration and program delivery, UTT is today a national success story. UTT has maintained close partnership with industry and community stakeholders and has established a track record of excellence. Today, UTT operates from some 10 locations throughout the country, including Tobago, increasing accessibility of tertiary level education. Its student enrollment has grown steadily over the years since its inception, growing from 1,650 in 2005 to 6,500 students in academic year 2008-2009. I understand that the enrollment in 2020 was up to an impressive 20,000 students. As I draw to a close, I have only skimmed the surface of Professor's many contributions, not just to UTT, but to the wider socioeconomic development of Trinidad and Tobago. Let us join in giving a resounding round of applause to this most outstanding son of the soil of Trinidad and Tobago. Thank you. I hope now that the audience can better appreciate the breadth of Professor's lifetime of achievements and understand why I'm adding another description, as he is nothing short of a national treasure. Professor, you are an extraordinary exemplar and citizen and gift to the people of Trinidad and Tobago. You are leaving an enduring legacy. We are confident that you will continue to inspire each person in our country so that they in turn will make a positive contribution to the world. I thank the leadership of UTT for providing this platform for recognizing Professor Julian. On behalf of the government and people of Trinidad and Tobago, I thank you wholeheartedly with sincerity and genuine admiration, and wish you continued good health, long life, and happiness. Thanks also to your family for supporting your life's work and taking good care of you in retirement on behalf of all of us. May God bless you, keep you, and reward your long life service. Thank you from a grateful nation. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. the Honorable Keith Rowley, Prime Minister of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago. How well you communicated to us the debt of gratitude that we owe to Professor Julian due to the magnitude of his achievements. You aptly described him as genius, tower of intellectual strength, leading by example, a pioneer, a stalwart, an entrepreneur, a legend par excellence. Dr. Rowley, thank you for that most comprehensive and powerful feature address. The program continues with Mr. Rana Mohip, Senior Instructor of Music at APA, and Mr. Prashant Patesa, who will grace us with a rendition of Chandi Jaisa, an Indian classical music piece. Please welcome Mr. Rana Mohip and Mr. Prashant Patesa. Good morning.
चांदी जैसा रंग है तेरा, सोने जैसे बाल, एक तू ही धनवान है गोरी, बाकी सब कंगाल। चांदी जैसा रंग है तेरा, सोने जैसे बाल, एक तू ही धनवान है गोरी, बाकी सब कंगाल। एक तू ही धनवान है गोरी, बाकी सब कंगाल। जिस रास्ते से तू गुजरे वो फूलों से भर जाए, जिस रास्ते से तू गुजरे वो फूलों से भर जाए। तेरे पैर की कोमल आहट सोते भाग जगाए, जो पत्थर चूले गोरी तू वो हीरा बन जाए। तू जिसको मिल जाए वो, जिसको मिल जाए वो हो जाए माला माल। एक तू ही धनवान है गोरी, बाकी सब कंगाल। चांदी जैसा रंग है तेरा, सोने जैसे बाल, एक तू ही धनवान है गोरी, बाकी सब कंगाल। जो बेरंग उस पर क्या क्या रंग जमाते हो, जो बेरंग उस पर क्या क्या रंग जमाते हो। तू नादान जाने कैसे रूप चुराते लो, नजरे भर भर देखे तुझको आते जाते लो। चैल चमेली रानी टोड़ा सोने जैसे बाल एक तू ही धनवान है गोरी बाकी सब कंगाल एक तू ही धनवान है गोरी बाकी सब कंगाल एक तू ही धनवान है गोरी बाकी सब कंगाल
I thank Mr. Rana Mohip and Mr. Prashant Patisa for that performance of Chandi Jaisa. And there's a shorter lull to accommodate Professor Julian, and we go back to the video presentation.
Like most villages in Trinidad and Tobago in the 1930s, Aruca was a small agricultural stop on the railway to Sangre Grande. In September 1932, Aruca is where Kenneth Stephen Julian was born. As early as his days at the local government primary school, Ken and his teachers noticed he had a special knack for helping classmates with their schoolwork. Ken went on to win a scholarship to pursue his secondary school career at St. Mary's College in Port of Spain. With his love for teaching, his first job was as a teacher at Fatima College. He soon moved on to UBOT, the United British Oilfields Trinidad Limited, where he once again earned a scholarship to study at the prestigious Nottingham University in England. With a freshly minted Bachelor of Science degree, first class honors, he returned to UBOT a few years later. But he didn't stop there. Ken went on to study at the University of British Columbia in Canada, becoming the first PhD graduate in electrical energy systems from that university. Once again, the lure of teaching drew him back. In 1962, he was invited by the University of the West Indies to join their newly established Faculty of Engineering. Dr. Julian was the university's first lecturer with a PhD and soon became the dean of the faculty, one of the Commonwealth's youngest university deans. He was named Professor Emeritus in 1997. His background and a presentation at a one-day industry conference technical session at the Queen's Hall caught the attention of Dr. Eric Williams, the session's chair. Dr. Williams, Trinidad and Tobago's first Prime Minister, was looking to reform the country's electrical sector and infrastructure. One exchange in particular intrigued Dr. Williams. Listen, Trinidadians should leave power generation to the British. How many boilers did England blow up before getting it right? I think TNT can do this. Let's take the risk and make this ours. Subsequently, Dr. Williams invited Professor Julian to serve on the board of TNTEC, the Trinidad and Tobago Electricity Commission. Over the next 40 years, Professor Julian would emerge as a catalytic figure in the global energy and education sectors and in a nation's economic and industrial transformation. From agricultural Aruca to modern-day game changer, Professor Ken Julian, a true transformer.
In so many cases in history, the mother of invention is not always necessity, it's audacity.
Eric Williams, his famous statement, well, where there was sugar, there'll not be wire rods. Even before it produces first unforeseen. That's what he had to say.
Right.
How does one man help engineer the transformation of a tract of swamp into a powerhouse that would transform a society dependent on agriculture into a giant in the global steel and energy arena. In September of 2022, almost 56 years to the day, after the Point Lisa's Industrial Port Development Corporation was incorporated, we returned to the estate with one of its pioneering figures and visionaries, ingenuity.
See, this whole road leading to the Point was built for Point Lisas.
Okay.
Yeah, this whole exchange going to Point Lisas.
What was here before?
I think some little truck or so.
Okay.
And before you had to get there,
Hold on.
we had to go to ship owners.
Right.
All that. But this was built because Point Lisas had a big port.
One of the men who dared to imagine that sugarcane workers and cocoa farmers could be transformed into makers of steel and harvesters of energy. When the energy and steel industries were dominated by the few nations that built them, the local economy was still dominated by agriculture. Tenacity.
But in the minds of the people, there's a big conference in England, Trinidad and Calypso and thing, man, Carnival, all this thing with our business.
Join us on the road in an exploration. How does a single individual become a transformer?
I had shoes, but it was kept for Sunday. You had to go to church, and you couldn't go to church barefooted.
Professor Julien, educator, electrical engineer, visionary, a change maker, identity.
We have something that a lot of countries do not have. How we got it, I don't know, but we have something here that is very precious, not fully utilized, but very precious. Part of the challenge of motivating young people is for some of these stories to be told.
Transformer, engineering the future of a nation.
In local parlance, we say when it's nice, we do it twice. So you got another glimpse. I now invite Professor Prakash Prasad, President of the University of Trinidad and Tobago, to deliver closing remarks. Professor Prakash Prasad.
Excellencies, I crave your indulgence and allow me to stand on the established protocol than before. Good morning, buenos dias, namaste. Having gotten such detailed information about Professor Julian, I will not repeat. I will make my comments commensurate with my height. So, firstly, on behalf of UTT staff, management staff, we want to express our sincere congratulations and thanks and appreciation to Professor Julian and also to his loving family for keeping him alive. Behind every successful man, there's a more successful woman. Clearly, this is the case here. On behalf of the many students from UE and UTT, and I just want to draw my mind back to the class of 73, 74 at UWI, first engineering students, listening starry-eyed to this distinguished lecturer, inspirational lecturer teaching us electrical systems. And I was not unique in that regard. To 1980, when I joined the Faculty of Engineering, and you were always there as a mentor. I was never sure why, but you were there always encouraging. Until you appointed me here in 2006 as Professor of Mechatronics, and again taught me from being a rather arrogant young man to understand the subtleties of management. So, so on behalf of all the students, thousands that you have taught over the years, who hold important positions all through the country and elsewhere, I want to say thank you. And it's my cultural tradition to always venerate teachers and mentors. So therefore, in the language of our ancestors, on behalf of all your former students, I want to say to you, sir, Maya Bhari Hu. I am extremely grateful. Khush Raho. May you always remain happy. I want to end by thanking you all for coming here today to celebrate with this distinguished gentleman. Indeed, thank you, and may God bless us all. Good morning.
Thank you very much, Professor Persad, President of the University of Trinidad and Tobago. Ladies and gentlemen, we have now reached the climax of this ceremony, which is the unveiling of the commemorative plaque and the presentation of the portrait that will adorn this building named after Professor Julian. To do us this honor, I invite the Honorable Prime Minister, Dr. Keith Rowley, the Minister of Education, Dr. Nayan Gatsby-Dolly, Professor Imber, Professor Persad, Philip Julian and his son Nathaniel for the unveiling. During the unveiling, we'll be treated to the lovely voice of, I call him Trinidad and Tobago's most celebrated tenor, Dr. Edward Cumberbatch, Assistant Professor of Foundation Courses at UTT. This is the moment.
This is the moment, this is the day when I cast all my doubts and demons on their way. Every endeavor I have faced ever is coming into play, is here and now today. This is the moment, this is the time when the momentum and the moment are in rise. Give me this moment, this precious chance. I'll gather up my past and make some sense at last. This is the moment when all I've done, all of my dreaming, scheming,
see why I have referred to him as Trinidad and Tobago's most celebrated tenor. Thank you very much, Dr. Edward Cumberbatch. And please note, there standing, the portrait was commissioned by Mr. David Boothman. Would you kindly put your hands together? I now invite Professor Imber and Professor Persad to present the portrait. To Philip Julian. Philip Julian, your son. Where's Nathaniel? Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in applauding this historic moment. I think at this stage we can say hip hip, hip hip. Well done, audience. I also now call on Mr. Darwin Manzano to present a token to Mrs. Patricia Julian. Darwin, where are you? There he is, walking through. Darwin, for the purpose of the photographers, you want Mrs. Julian to come this way. Right there with all the cameras. We want that moment. We want that moment to be captured. Yes, Mr. Darwin Manzano presents a token to Mrs. Patricia Julian. Thank you and congratulations in order. Ladies and gentlemen, this concludes our ceremony. On behalf of the University of Trinidad and Tobago, I'd like to thank all our guests for gracing us with this presence and participation. I would also like to thank all the performers, speakers, members of staff, and everyone else who came together to make this auspicious event possible. As we close, we will be entertained by the APA choir yet again as they sing, "May the Road Rise."
This is TTT. Live for local.
50 by 20, 50 by 25.